Hi, welcome to another episode of the Uncustomary Love podcast. I am your host, Uncustomary, and I am here with Marlee Liss. And I'm really happy. This kind of just really worked out. Hi, Marlee.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. We actually got connected in a really kind of organic, random, recent way. I believe it was through Leah Nauer. I never remember how to say her name of Basic Witches, the podcast, right? Was she just kind of like tagged a bunch of women she was empowered by? And I was like, yes.
Yeah, something about her witch magic bringing us together for sure.
Yeah, so we should probably send her a card or something.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I am so impressed by you. And I don't know you as well as I usually do for people that I interview on podcasts, which is, I think, good and bad. Like it never good or bad, but it's interesting. And usually when I don't know someone as well, I will kind of do my Virgo moon wants to like research the crap out of someone. And I was blown away by how amazing you are online and your whole presence and everything's just so authentic and it feels very like reachable, even though what you are talking about is very intense and strong. So I wanted to just say that first. And I'm also doing something that I don't usually do, which feels a little chaotic in my brain, which is I am not structuring this the way that I usually would with like having questions and things. I have like a couple things that I really want to talk about, but I kind of allowed myself to step back from going so deep with you in a way that felt like interrogating. And I wanted to just let this be what it is, which is a conversation. So I'm really happy about that, actually. So I feel like we can't really start without acknowledging the reason that like you have gotten a lot of attention in the media, which is that you have the first case of sexual assault being in North America specifically to have concluded with restorative justice. So one is, has that actually been, do you know if there's another case like that was before you in another part of the world that had that happened with you before?
Good question. And I love the free form conversation too. You're a Virgo, you have some Virgo and I have
a yeah, I also, that was another thing I wanted to know was what is your sun?
I'm like all Sagittarius, like moon, no wait, sun, rising Sagittarius, moon Aries, Mars Leo, like just a lot of fire.
That's a lot of fire. Yeah. So I'm technically a Cancer sun, but I'm born like literally the hour it changed. So, and I have like 4 Gemini placements, including my rising, and my moon is Virgo. So wow. I have a bit of a balance, but there's an enormous amount of Gemini in me. Yeah. We're really, right now we're filming this on the Sagittarius full moon eclipse. So you're probably just like,
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I spent my whole last night at karaoke singing Kelly Clarkson songs. So that's
that's some fire right there.
But yes, restorative justice. So my case is the first in North America to conclude with restorative justice through the legal system. Definitely want to acknowledge like Indigenous communities have been doing this outside the legal system for a long time.
Yeah.
But through the courts, this is the first time. And I don't know if it's happened in the world before. It's definitely like, for anyone who doesn't know what restorative justice is, it's basically prioritizing repair over punishment. Right. So for me, it was like I fought for my assailant to go to therapy, and then we eventually met in an 8-hour circle instead of proceeding to criminal trial.
Right. So when I looked up restorative justice, because I've heard that term used in other settings that weren't necessarily related to sexual assault. And I think that it comes up where there's the idea of basically rehabilitation instead of punishment, I guess, is kind of like the way that I have kind of looked at a lot of things in terms of restoration or rehabilitation, instead of like just go into a hole and don't even think about like why this happened, how to potentially like quote unquote fix it or not do it again, or all of these things. And I come from a background of working in a psychiatric rehab center, and that word was always, it was actually, I felt like there was a lot of interesting charge around that, because you can actually say you're rehabilitating someone and then not do much about it as well.
Mm.
So when I looked up that term, it was said, it's an approach to justice where the response to a crime specifically is like to organize a meeting, like you said, like between the victim, which is you in this case, and then the person that was the offender, and then to sometimes like widespread it to the community, which I thought was a really interesting aspect of that. So like you said, the circle, was that something that was like, how many people were there?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a really powerful aspect of it too, because it's like acknowledging that trauma ripples,
Yeah,
right? Everything ripples.
everything.
Like, yeah. So one person, like for me, I was sexually assaulted and it changed my mom's life and it
Right.
changed my sister's life, right? So my mom and sister were both in the circle. As not just people supporting me, but as people personally affected.
Yeah.
And my assailant was there along with his friend, my lawyer, and a crown attorney, again, as people who are now like involved in the emotions around this experience, and two mediators, and that was it.
Wow. Can I ask, for my visual mind, when you say a circle, do you mean a visual, like an actual circle?
Yeah, a literal circle. And I feel like everything that restorative justice is embodying an alternative to the patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's
It's
why I was
like,
asking
yeah.
that, truly, because I was like, it's like very like the, when I asked about if this was happening before, I felt that very indigenous aspect of this, like the culture of this being something that is, well, like the opposite of beyond our years, like before us, like before the
Mhm,
patriarchy. And when we
mhm,
think about a courtroom, everyone is sitting like shoulder to shoulder and looking at one thing and
mhm.
not connecting, really.
Yeah, yeah, and it's wild because my experience, I mean, everyone's experience in life is unique. My one reason my experience is unique is because I walked the punitive path for 3 years. So I experienced trial,
Right.
a preliminary trial, basically to
And
see if there
error.
was enough evidence. Yeah,
Trial and error.
a trial and total error. Like, so absolutely. So, oh my gosh, like I experienced that, what it's like to be in a courtroom. And then I also experienced the circle and just the contrast. Like I just think, I'm like, how are we thinking that we're going to be able to deal with sexual violence through such
Right.
dehumanizing,
When it's
non-consensual,
already
apathetic
dehumanized.
means? Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Who was the, or what was the, since you were already in trials and like the system, quote unquote, what was the idea that's restorative justice came to you through? How did that
Mm,
spark?
good question. So I actually didn't know about restorative
I think a
justice
lot of people don't.
up until like a year and a bit ago. And this is one of the reasons, just one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing this, because
Yeah.
I want everyone to know about it. I know
Just as
it's
an
not
option.
for everyone, but
Yeah,
yeah, I'm like, we should all know our options at least. And we should have options at
exactly.
least. So yeah, I didn't know about restorative justice, but from the moment I reported, and I reported because that's all I knew. Like
Mhm.
literally after sexual assault, I built up the courage to tell my friend, who was my roommate at the time. And we Googled, like right after I got home, we Googled, what do you do after you're raped? I was like, go to the hospital, get
And
a rape
isn't
kit,
that insane
report.
too, that we still don't really know? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously there's a lot of shock, fear, anxiety, trauma that's already happening in that panic state as well. But even without, we're still just like, why aren't we taught still? And why do we need to be taught? Oh God, there's so much.
I know. Yeah. So that's what it said to do. It's like, go to the hospital, report.
Right.
And they were like, when it got to the time where they said, do you want to report? They're like, would you like to report and potentially go to trial and whatnot and all that whole thing, or nothing at all? And at no point was anyone like, you
Right.
could also, right? It
Yeah.
never happened.
Trial or nothing.
Trial or nothing. And I didn't want nothing. So that's really why I reported.
Where's the middle?
Yeah, I was like, am I supposed to go home and watch Netflix and get on with my, like, I don't
Right.
want nothing. So I reported, and that supposedly, and I had no idea that that meant me technically consenting to 3 years in
Right.
the punitive system, answering every question, doing photo lineups, coming into the
And how can
station.
you truly consent in that state?
Exactly. Exactly. It's ironically so non-consensual. The system to deal with
Exactly.
non-consent. Like,
Exactly. You literally just had your consent stripped from you. And then
mhm,
a team of people are asking for you to consent to something that you don't understand, that's going to affect your life for
right.
a very long time,
Yeah.
potentially forever.
With the notion that it's for me. It's like, this
Right.
is for you. Right.
But that's
Um,
because we have been given this absence of the gray, that it is
mhm.
black and white, that you have been raped and you have options, but it's yes or no.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Exactly. So I didn't know it existed. And I would just say to friends, I was like, if this was my world, if it was my world, we wouldn't do this whole medieval courtroom
Yeah.
costume bullshit. We'd like cry together. I would ask questions. I'd be like, what the fuck happened? Like,
Yeah.
how did we get here? I would hear an apology. We would humanize each
Yeah.
other. And I always held that, but I really, because of the conditioning we get around what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to feel after something like sexual assault, I really deemed that want very delusional. I was
Right.
like, oh my God,
The
people
idea that
are
you're going to
gonna,
forgive someone who was violent and angry and taking away your anything from you is apparently wrong,
yeah.
right? And it doesn't mean that you should or that you have to, but your desire to is now another thing you're doing wrong.
Yeah. And my own needs of like I needed to ask him certain
Right.
questions. I needed to like let him really know how much he impacted
And you
me.
don't get that in this like very clinical courtroom.
Mhm.
And you're not allowed to it's a very strict setting of like what is okay and what's not, and it's like under the guise of your safety and all of this, and it's like,
Mhm.
what is it that you really need to come away from this? Some people just want to be heard, some people want to be seen, some people want to know what happened to you earlier that day. Like the fill in the blanks for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just kind of laughing a bit because I'm just like when I think back to court, it's so ridiculous. Like I'm
You're
like
asking
a
questions like they already know, like what is your name, and it's like, all right, like calm down.
they're like pulling up texts as evidence. I remember they like pulled up all these texts that I had shared with my friends that were ridiculous. Like we had a joke of bringing like sweet potatoes out to clubs with us. I
Love
don't know
that.
for
I
I
don't
don't
need
know
I don't
why.
need context. That is
There's not even any. And they like pulled up a picture. They're like, "What is this text about?" And I'm like,
and you're
"What the
like, do you want to know if
hell?"
that's a yam or a sweet potato, or if this is funny or not? Because the answer is sweet potato and it's hilarious.
It's ridiculous. And then I'm like a Jewish queer woman being asked to swear on the Bible that I'm telling
You're
the
like,
truth.
this
Like,
means literally nothing, but all right. Yeah, I swear hard.
yeah.
I fucking swear. Oh my God.
So there's so much to that. But yeah, so I basically had this want all along and I didn't have the name for it. And no one was telling me. I told
Yeah.
therapists that I wanted that. I told legal professionals I wanted that. No one was ever like, that sounds like restorative justice. So it wasn't until I got subpoenaed for the criminal trial 3 years after the actual rape happened, um, that I was like, fuck this. I'm not going back to trial. Like, I'm gonna drop the charges. And
Wow.
I said to my friend, I was like, but like she was like, is that okay with you? And I was like, honestly, no, like it does not feel good at all. She was like, well, what do you want? And I told her that vision that I had. And she said, so make it happen. And
Oh, so it's,
yeah.
oh gosh, so it's like I'll drop the charges if like we can
Um,
do this thing. Is that kind of
Pretty kind of like pretty much because she was like, so make it happen. My friend was just like, so make it happen.
mhm.
And that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this seriously.
Yeah.
Like she's right, like this is valid, what I want is valid. So I started researching, and that's when I found restorative justice. And then I posted in my Instagram story being like, does anyone know anything about restorative justice? That's how I got connected to a lawyer, because someone was like, contact this lawyer I've heard of, they're an advocate. That's how I got connected to a lawyer. And then we kind of like together met up and went into the prosecutor's office and we're like, this is what we want. I don't want to go to trial. I want restorative justice. And they were like, one of them, there was two prosecutors. One of them was like, oh, honey, don't you understand that rape is bad? Like,
Oh
you know.
yeah, actually, I'm fully fucking aware. Thank you so much. Was that a man?
No, it was a woman.
Really?
And it's interesting because it was two women, and I almost feel like one was like the epitome of the woman who's learned to make it in the patriarchy. And
Mm.
she like, I'm from Canada, right? So she's like, she a big deal in terms of lawyers. It's like she wrote the book on how to
Right.
deal with sex crimes, like, and she's like a hardcore attorney, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, she was just like, rape is bad, bad equals prison. What's wrong with this human that she doesn't understand that?
Oh, like in her mind, but you doing this, you weren't taking him to
Yeah,
the fruition of what she thought was the right thing for him.
right.
Yeah.
And my thing, I was like, I think she was like, don't you get rape is bad? I'm like, I think it's so bad that we have to do something different because what we're doing isn't
Isn't
fucking
working.
working.
Yeah. We're not,
Yeah,
the spaghetti we're throwing at the wall is no longer sticking. And I don't know
it's
if it
not
ever was.
sticking. Yeah, it's not sticking 100%. And thank goddess for the other crown attorney in the room, the other prosecutor, because she was like, hold on a sec, like this makes sense. She was
Wow.
like, it's true, right? Like, so few people report in the first place because they don't want to go through this shit system.
Yeah.
When we do report, it's traumatizing for
Yes.
us, for victims. Almost always rapists are acquitted. And if they're not acquitted, then they go to prison, and what? They sit in shame and isolation and more violence. And then they come out, like, all those things are the biggest drivers for
And it
violence.
just cycles.
Yeah, it just cycles and cycles and cycles. And so she got it, and she kind of like, they started sort of fighting for the case. And there was like a 2 month period where I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Um,
And that's
and
crazy for it to be
yeah,
out of your hands as the person advocating and the victim. Like,
yeah,
it's,
yeah, I know. I know. So for that reason, when I did get a call 2 months later, and my lawyer was like, "Oh my God, guardian angel, crown attorney, prosecutor came
we're doing
through.
it.
We're doing it. He's going to start therapy right away, and eventually you'll meet in the circle when you're ready." And that alone was such a healing moment because it was the first time I was actually being heard and
Yeah.
considered.
And it took literally 2 months from the ask of actually just even finding out the lexicon of what you wanted, verbalizing that, and then someone actually accepting the ask, let alone the 3 years prior
Yeah.
of you knowing what it was intuitively that you wanted without having the answer of how to ask for it just because you didn't know what the words were.
Mm-hmm. Which is ridiculous.
It is.
And I'm like a white cisgender
Can you
woman.
imagine if any of those
Yeah.
things were different and how this would
Mhm.
have probably not gone the same?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, if this was this hard for me to access, then fuck.
And what is it
Like,
really that you're asking for? Like, to not send someone to jail and for them to go to therapy and to confront you and to say that there's like, like the things that you're asking for are like, for most people, if you were to look at it, is actually not like that crazy. It's really not.
mm.
It's mind-blowing is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And it's so interesting because it really, like, obviously now I've gone so deep into what this represents for people because I've shared this with the media, I've shared it all over the place. And I've seen all sorts of reactions.
Of
I've
course.
all across the spectrum. And it goes so deep for people. Like, just the safety that people experience through saying, here are the good people, here are the bad people. Let's make sure our world is only good people and like throw the rest of them out.
Yeah.
And when we throw like a curveball in that and we're like, well, this is a human, and are they a bad seed or were they raised in a fucking rape culture
Right.
that taught them to justify these actions and taught them to suppress their emotions every single day until they just erupt into violence? So
Yeah.
it makes people ask the hard questions.
Yeah. And I want to pause here and say, one, that I commend the crap out of you for being able to not only ask for what you want and continue going for it, but to then not hold this in a vacuum and tell it to people who are not just going to have positive reactions and pat you on the back for it, because there are going to be people that are going to, till the day they die, and new generations are going to say, that man did a bad thing and should go to jail. There are rapists and murderers, and those should all those people should be in a box or an island or something. And there's only a couple things that you can like maybe see a gray area for, and those other people are, once you do one bad thing, it is done. And you are going to get pushback for this forever. And
Mhm.
everything that you are doing and have experienced is a forever thing, and that is so intense. And I am just so proud for you that you are doing this. It's a lot. And I also just want to say to the people listening that what we are saying right now and what Marlee is doing and talking about is something that Marlee did. That if you have been assaulted or know someone that has been assaulted or raped, that restorative justice might not be the thing that you want, choose, or works out for you to do. You can even attempt to do that, right? And like that might not be the way that it ends up feeling right.
Mhm.
There are completely different paths for different people. And just because we are saying right now that this is fascinating and a completely different wrench to throw into a system because what has been working or not working isn't working, doesn't mean that you are not allowed to do what feels right in your body and bones.
Mhm.
I think,
100%.
would you
A
agree?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And I wanna add to that. The thing that I think is for all of us here is normalizing putting survivors' voices at the center
Mm,
and normalizing asking survivors, what do you actually
yeah.
want and need? And normalizing making that a priority.
And
That
having
to
options.
me, yeah. And having options, like being able to make a informed decision around something so huge.
And
And
not
then I wanna say
walk.
too, like um, just so people know, like restorative justice comes in so many forms.
Right.
And like mine was one form. So just so people know that in terms of options, like it can be something where you never have to meet face to face. It can be like they go to therapy for a year and you exchange letters. Like there's so many creative formats to kind of safeguard in that way. And you're right, it's not for everyone. And what should be for everyone is
your choice.
Giving a crap about survivors' voices and feelings and choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also not here to like appropriate or like commend, can't think of the right word, rape. Like, we're not saying that assault by any means, violence, rape is okay, and that saying you're sorry for it makes it okay. That it's that there is a toxicity in the culture, and there are reasons that people turn to really horrible things, and sometimes being compassionate means that that cycle might stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think it's exactly that. It's breaking cycles, because as long as we do this, it's the same as cancel culture. Like punitive system, we could swap it out for cancel culture in this conversation. And it's like, as long as we're like, this one person is crappy and they're canceled, nothing's gonna change, because it's like, wait a second, why are so many people exhibiting those behaviors? Like, what's actually at the root of it? And let's address that. And that shouldn't be on survivors at all, and it's something that needs to exist in our world. So for me, I had a fire lit under my ass to address that, and so that's why that happened. And also, so important to say, it was for me. I think a lot of people project this like saintly thing onto my story, and they're like, oh wow, like you did him a service, like as if I was dressed in all white being like, I grant you forgiveness.
I'm not thinking about him at all. When I hear this story, I think about other future victims. Is what I think about your dharma as a person that is here, that like this was in your body and your soul and spirit and mind on repeat. That was the cycle for you, that this didn't have a name yet, but you knew what you wanted, and that needed to come out in your lifetime. And it, like, yes, like the purpose of it, like in this part of your story, was involving this person, but it wasn't necessarily about him. It's about the bigger picture, which can then represent options for other people.
Yeah.
I hear this and say, well, damn, that speaks to me. I want that.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. And it does, it ripples into so many things. I said, that's something I said in the circle. I was like, this is so much bigger than us.
Yeah.
Because it's this breaking of a cycle of like, you hurt me, I hurt you.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's sit down and just, like, for me, I'm like, the importance of grieving about something that's been happening for so long, for centuries.
Yeah.
Sitting down and actually grieving about it.
Yeah.
And then clearing that stuff out of my body so that I can come into something way more free and empowered.
Yeah. And I think like because we're talking about rape and things that are violent or completely threatening our safety and security, and that baseline, it's very charged and emotional. And I think if we were to, if you allow me to swap this out for something that is not as charged. And, you know, I think about the time that I lived next door to someone who was doing construction every morning. I know this is a very, very strong switch. Like, let's just talk about construction.
No, it's good. It's perfect.
Like, sometimes I think it helps to have a different analogy. This guy was doing construction literally from the day I moved in for 3 years, and he had promised that it was only going to be 6 months, and it was just this ongoing thing. And he finally needed to do something that required a permit, and that he had to put up like one of those signs where he had to go to get like a zoning license or something at a court. And I was like, I'm going to be that one person at the courtroom, like, that's like, excuse me, I don't like this guy, Patrick. He's ruining my sleep. I can't, like, I couldn't record a podcast like this because I had no idea it was horrible. And it was like 3 years of no sleep. It was horrible. So I went to the court, and their reaction was, oh, well, can you like not deal with the judge and like please go talk to him over there? And my reaction was like, what? Why am I here then? Like, he lives next door to me. But then I was like, well, damn. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like my whole thing is communication. But the thing was that he wouldn't communicate back. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, like, why do we need, I mean, sometimes it is for safety, right? Like, we want stuff in writing, we want things to protect us, and we want to know that things like can be a fallback, right? But in that case, it was like, all I really wanted to know was, when is the stop date? When can I expect? Can we create like boundaries and communication and open this up? And we did.
Mm-hmm.
It needed to be in that space, apparently, because he wouldn't respond to my text. But like, I think that that could be like an example of this, where we're literally a very small thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, it's absolutely that. You know what I think of? I think of friggin' Glee. and and this happens in so many TV shows, movies, whatever, because it's real. The person who's being like the bully towards the person who's being homophobic and bullying like all of the LGBTQ people is so often a closeted person
right.
themselves, right? And so it's like it's easy. I feel like it gets easy when we think of little kids because it's easier to like source that compassion. We're like, oh, so cute. Oh.
Yeah.
And if a kid like punched someone else on the schoolyard, a little kid, we'd probably be like, hey, buddy, like, what's going on? Like, what happened? Instead of being like, put the kid in detention for the next 3 weeks, nobody talk to him, he
Put them in
needs to learn a
isolation.
lesson.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's the point of that? How is that going to help anyone?
But
And how is the kid who was punched in the face going to get to hear an apology, going to get to understand why that
it's so
happened?
disconnected.
Yeah.
And I think that I was literally thinking that I meant to say that I think so much of this comes back to fear and shame. But fear, my boyfriend told me when we were first dating, he would all dogs bring me so much joy, and he would point out dogs to me like on the street and be like, oh my god, look, that one's wearing a jacket, and I would like light up. And he never said that he had a problem or anything with dogs, and I didn't assume otherwise because he never vocalized it or said other like or anything, and he was actively pointing them out to me. And then one day, like, this whole thing happened, and I kind of just like got this weird vibe, and we got into like an argument about it because I could feel that he wasn't being fully honest, and he kind of just reacted. He was like, I don't like dogs. And I was like, whoa. And part of me like wanted to like run, and I had all these like preconceived judgments of like, only serial killers don't like dogs, and like I wanted to just be like, well, if you don't like dogs, you don't like me. And like I had all these like original like immediate reactions, right? And then I just stopped, and I breathed, and I said, what happened to you with a dog? I
Mm-hmm.
when I was this age, this dog hurt me. And I was like, there it is. Because we don't come into this world really hating dogs. He
Mm-hmm.
loves other animals. He's obsessed with my cats. So I was just like, this doesn't add up. Tell me about the fear. And we
Mm-hmm.
were able to like untangle that very fucking quickly, but no one had ever
Mm-hmm.
asked him, and he had never talked about it. And I think that it's just so much of our lives are, it's like these, we're come in with love, and it's blocked with fear and trauma and pain, and actions like that of taking the kid away from the dog and not letting them see that the dog was actually abused, and the parents of the dog were abusive, and that was actually toxic, and it wasn't about you, babe, it was about the dog and the dog's parents, and that dog wasn't mean. Not all dogs are mean, and it's not about you either.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, I'm snapping. I'm like, that's exactly it. That's such a
it.
that's exactly it. Yeah.
And I was thinking um, about like the legal system and the courts, and how people will have strong reactions to restorative justice, specifically for sexual assault. And I have a friend who was raped as like a preteen, and it was horrifying. You know, I mean, everything in that world is, and they had a rape kit done, and there was DNA collected, and nothing really happened until like about 10 years later. That person's DNA was like matched up in another place, and they were arrested, and this person had to go to a trial after they had like been hospitalized and dealt with PTSD and flashbacks and medication and, you know, the whole damn gamut of PTSD in your teens, and like put themselves through college, and, you know, like really started over, and was completely put back there after 10 years, because that's how the legal system works.
Yeah.
And I thought that was something that immediately came to my mind when I read your story, was how you kind of gave yourself closure outside of the control of the patriarchy and the court system, because it doesn't matter really what happens now with, I feel like that sounds strange. It's not that we're like releasing him as an accountable human, but the whole idea of restorative justice is that he is now accountable and in programs and getting treatment.
Yeah, I'm so grateful you shared that, and I'm sending so much love to your friend. Just like, yeah. And it's just the way our culture's normalized everyone turning their head towards the perpetrator and saying, well, how are we going to punish this person? And the person who is harmed is left alone and hurt and even used and abused. Like, right, the punitive system, my experience, it was like, let's figure out a way to punish the perpetrator and use and abuse the victim in order to make sure that happens.
You're like exploited out west because you're the only one. It's because it's essentially a they said situation. And because they want the bad to go somewhere else, the good, so quote unquote, right, is now tell me everything in your soul so that we can put the bad in a box.
Yeah.
And you know, this person, that the rapist went to court as a result of her having to go to trial and see and face him and redo all of this. And now they live in fear because that prison sentence isn't a life sentence. And like you said, this is so cyclical, and they're now in a very violent system. And now he might feel as well like that person put me here, right? You never know. And that the victim is worried that like that person could come for them again, right? Who knows? And we don't know. And that's what's it's really scary. And I think that this restorative justice gives like such another option. And it's not that you can't do anything else. It's just like, what if someone had given them this option? And it's never I think it should also be addressed that like all of these options still suck because
I always at some point in an interview make sure to be like, no route for dealing with rape is going to be rainbows and sunshines, because we're still dealing with a rape.
Because what happened is rape or an assault. And I loved that that you wrote a book, and it's called Rehumanize, and you can get it on Amazon at the very least. And it's poems that a lot of what you wrote within hours, right, of your assault, which is incredible. And I thought that is so beautiful and such a a powerful, charged time to create art. And I think that people will like see that description and be overwhelmed and drawn to that for a lot of reasons. And I also want to say that, like, there's no right way to process trauma ever. Like, I love that you did that. And I also want to say, like, when people hear that too, that like, if you didn't write a poem, that it's also like, it's okay,
Yeah.
you know? Like, I think sometimes I feel like when I see someone go through something and they created something beautiful and I didn't, like something that I feel like I can compare that to, I'm like, well, fuck, like I missed that moment or something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I almost want to say like, because again, it's like the same response I'll get to restorative justice sometimes where people are like, wow, how saintly, how whatever. And it's like,
That's just what you did.
be 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 selfish in
Yeah,
your trauma healing. And for me, I needed to write. If I didn't write, I wouldn't be here for
exactly.
real. That was my freaking lifeboat. Like that was like I needed to write.
Yeah.
And then I also needed to share it because
Yeah.
impact was my other lifeboat. So for me, I needed that.
Yeah.
Restorative justice, for me, I needed that. So it's like I kept honoring myself, I kept honoring my needs, I kept being like, it's not even selfish, there's such a negative connotation, but focused on my own self, valuing my own self, and letting that guide my journey. So I'm like, everyone do that, like survivors, and it's gonna look different for all of us.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
about it as like the introverted, extroverted kind of Instagram profile, you know, how we glorify a lot of extroverted like feeds. And because that's just like what we've been like taught, quote unquote, like in this like world of Instagram, that is like a good life or something to live. And that doesn't mean that anything else or that the in between is better or worse or different, or you know, it just is, you know, like we aren't enough or anything, we just are. And I just like I wasn't I when I read that, I was triggered by the fact that you wrote in such a charged time. And I know that if I'm triggered, that other people will be as well. And
Mm.
I just like wanted to acknowledge that because I was so impressed and also like, damn, you know, like, and I thought that that
Yeah.
was like really fucking cool. And also like, why wasn't I doing
I also want people to know I was not like I did not intend for that to be a book
I
when I wrote it.
I'm fucking
I was
I thought
not
you were
like
sitting down like, and the prose shall be like, yeah.
no. It was my literal journal.
Yeah.
And actually, interestingly, I was very at that time, I was like 21. I was very ashamed of my darkness. I was very ashamed of sadness, anger. I was like, I'm supposed to be happy all the time.
Right.
And I was like, no one will ever see these
Yeah.
poems. I didn't even call them poems. It was just
Just
me.
writing.
Like I literally would wake up, and again, it wasn't like I was like, I'm so motivated to write a book. It was like, it was more like I was having
There's stuff in your head
severe
you gotta get.
PTSD
Yeah.
symptoms. I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I would just start writing. And it was like, I'm so grateful that my spirit
Yeah.
found that outlet, because it was like, and I think something I wrote in the book, and honestly, I have no idea what is in that book. Like that was like, I call it PTSD vomited onto paper.
I
Like,
bet. Yeah.
yeah. But something was like, I'm taking these really destructive thoughts in my head and putting them into creation on paper. And I have no idea. Like, I really feel like some source of spirit, love, whatever was guiding me in that, because the rest of my experience was so foggy and so chaotic and so dysfunctional. And
Yeah.
like I couldn't work, I couldn't go to school,
Yeah.
I couldn't, like, you know, so I was catatonic a lot of the time. And so I'm like, wow, I don't know how all these words are on this paper, but they are.
Yeah. It's almost like I think there's a weird beauty sometimes to this like channel that can come through different parts of us, even through illness and symptoms, you know, like I also have PTSD, I have OCD and a ton of other fucking labels or whatever. But one of my symptoms of OCD before I ever went to cognitive behavioral therapy and was that I couldn't make a full 360 turn without like unwinding myself. But I could do it when I was dancing. Like I danced for 11 years and I could do like triple pirouettes as long as music was playing. And I think about it sometimes as like when someone has a stutter, but they can read poetry, you know, and like I can do certain things even during a flashback that I don't know that I'm capable of or wouldn't assume that I would be capable of. And it's so interesting the way that our body can still do something that we're like, we think we're completely gone. And I think there might even be a lesson in that we feel so just like ruptured and gone and disconnected and everything, but we're still in there, even in this line.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, it's kind of miraculous. Like, yeah, it is. It's like I don't know, like a glimmer of light coming into such darkness. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really grateful that you have written that book, and I'm sure so many people are as well and have gotten so much healing from those poems. And I want to ask you one other big thing before we kind of wrap up, which is I've had this recent kind of cognition process of realizing with trauma that I feel like there is this collective human desire for us to want to go back to our lives before the trauma. You know, I talk about reconnecting to our joy or connecting to it in the first place through merriment. That's what I do. And I'm never really talking about like removing the trauma or the fear and like barreling past it. I'm really actually addressing the crap out of it. It's very important. But I'm realizing how much people kind of do want to barrel past it or at least kind of hurdle it and like jump over it. So it's like, this thing happened to me when I was 21 and I felt joy at 19. And I would really like to channel the joy at 19 now that I'm 33. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts about like this idea of really reconnecting to our joy and paving a new life that is full of what it is that we desire without really clinging to what was before?
Yeah, I love that. And it takes so much courage, the friggin' healing journey, but I really feel like ultimately it's so worth it. Like I can just speak for myself. Like I wouldn't want to go back to who I was at 19, at 20, even though I was beautiful. I was like so joyful, so sunny, whatever. But I didn't understand so many things. And the unraveling that happened through this sexual assault was essential because it was like I removed all these layers of conditioning that I'd been carrying with me for years that I didn't even know were there. It like forced me to remove all those things. And then it was almost like at that point, I eventually got to a point of having like a blank canvas, if that makes sense. It's like I took all the gunk off because I had to. And eventually I had a blank canvas. And then I was like, now what? And that's kind of like the preciousness that I brought with me in my healing journey, especially around sexuality. It was like all of my conditioning around sexuality was like just brought to the ground, like slash, like I could not even think about being sexual with anyone. Like I felt so shut down. And then it was like I had this like big awakening journey of why is any of this like this? Like, why is this happening? What is rape culture? What are boys learning? What are women learning? What is gender? Like, just all these questions that like allowed me to let so much go, and grief that allowed me to let so much go. And then from that space, it was like rebirth after death. It was like, okay, now I've cleared it all out and I can actually start. I don't want to say start new because there's still remnants, but it's like I had that opportunity. Like for me, this is what I'd say for me. I had the opportunity to be like, I'm almost treating my sexuality like a round two. I'm having firsts, like firsts again. I'm having a first kiss again. I'm having first everything again. I even lost my period for a while and then I got it back and I was like, this is my second first period and I get to redo it my way this time. And I'm committed to it being healing this time. Every experience, I'm committed to it being healing as much as I can control. And that's been so precious. And that's really what I teach because I work with women all over the world. And it's like, no matter what our stories are, we all have crap to clear out when it comes to conditioning, when it comes to shame and trauma. And we all have beauty and joy and pleasure and healing to bring in. So it's like remove it first and then bring in all the beauty, embody all the joy.
Yeah. And I think you can do both at once as well.
100%. Yeah, it's like all part of it. It's all part of it for sure.
I love that so much. Oh my God. I love what you said about having new firsts. I always say like you can start your day over whenever you want. Like you can just decide that like it's a new day, because sometimes we're like, well, this day fucking sucks and like it's already 2 p.m. Like, okay, we'll just like decide that it's a new day. Like just like decide. And I mean, I don't want to take away the power of the first that you have created or anything. But I also think that it could be powerful for anyone, especially people that have experienced sexual assault, if they haven't decided to do that for themselves yet, or like at the moment that this happened, right? To give them power to make that decision for themselves to do it now. Because like time is whatever, time is yours. And if you feel like this is speaking to you, like what Marlee is saying, like to create a new first, if you want a second round, whether it's with sexuality or embodiment or joy or damn, whatever, start it the fuck over. You can have a round 2 and a round 4 and a round 11. And I loved also what you said about not loving who you were at 19, because I like to say that it's not, you can have as many chapters as you want, and it doesn't mean chapter 2 and chapter 20 weren't beautiful. It's just part of what's happening. And this chapter gets to be whatever you want it to be. Start it over if you want. If you want a new first kiss, let it be labeled as such. It's up to you.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so it's such like a romantic approach to life. Like and it's playful as well. It's like oh my gosh, like this version of me has never done a podcast interview before.
It's kind of sexy.
It is.
Because we get to say that we had our first kiss with this person, right? But like, it might feel like a fucking amazing new version of me that has unraveled this skin, and I'm just like walking around like, just because I have like this construct of like, we've decided like that virginity is a construct, so why can't I have like shed my skin and be like, I've never been kissed? Like
yeah, this version of me, I say that all the time. Just start a sentence with this version of me and then say it's your first. This version of me has never drank water before.
Oh my God, this version of me has never had an orgasm. Watch me go.
Yes, exactly.
Let's do this. I'm gonna do that all weekend with everything.
I love that. Me too.
With everything. This version of me has never seen a butterfly. Look at it. And that brings into like childlike wonder as well.
Exactly.
Everything with new eyes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I love that everything that you have done pretty much is just full on teacher healer mode. You know, you have done the thing where it's like you've turned the storm into the lesson. You have like everything that felt horrible really to you and the struggle, quote unquote, is now you teach and you heal in so many modalities through embodiment and pleasure, and teaching other people how to do it as well through activism and spirituality. And oh my goodness, the ways in which to work with you are amazing. And I am so impressed by you, I must say. And we are running out of time, but I want to ask you two questions that I ask everybody just to round this out, which is like, the first one is, what is inspiring you right now? Just anything, food, colors, anything at all, like anything.
Yeah. The first thing I'm like, the gays.
Yeah, I mean, we're about to enter like Pride Month.
Well, so I'm living in Mexico right now in
Oh,
Florida,
yeah?
and it's actually Pride right now.
Oh, cool.
And I just came out as lesbian this past January.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I was out as bi before, and then I came out as
That's
lesbian.
fantastic.
And it has been fantastic. It's been like such a gorgeous homecoming. And yeah, so there's just rainbows everywhere.
This is your first lesbian pride in Mexico. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, Mexico, exactly. So yeah, the gays truly, and just the celebration of love that's like in the air right now. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And then the last thing that I ask everybody is the name of my business is Uncustomary, and this is the Uncustomary Love Podcast. So what does the word uncustomary mean to you? What do
you Good question. What a cool word too. Like, yeah, uncustomary. Well, to me, like customs and whatnot sounds so traditional and boxy, and it's like you're supposed to do it this way. And then uncustomary is just
very traditional.
Yeah, and then uncustomary is just like the literal opposite of that. And like just looking at on the screen, I know this is going to be a podcast, a lot of people won't see, but you have your flower crown and your rainbows and the chakra signs and all these colors behind you. And I'm just like, I feel like that's it. Just like the opposite, like if we picture a beige box, that feels very customary to me. And then everything in your world right now is like the opposite, like the colors, the vibrancy, the freedom, the play, the openness. So like that is what I feel of.
Oh, I love the freedom aspect of it. It's so funny because I have synesthesia and beige literally hurts my body.
Wow. Yeah, it's like beige.
That's so funny. I actually like thinking of the word customs aspect of it. When you said that, I immediately just thought of going back to the beginning of this with restorative justice and the custom of courts and the patriarchy, and you choosing to be uncustomary in the way that you sought your own justice and safety and what you wanted. And I think that's uncustomary as fuck.
Yeah, I felt that. I was like, oh, I love that. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Brings
it.
Well, exactly. Thank you so much for spending this time with me from Mexico, and happy first lesbian pride. What a beautiful place to experience that for the first time, and many more to come.
Thank you so much. And definitely anyone listening, like message me, reach out. I'm a human. Follow me on Insta, say hi.
Yes, follow
let's dance, let's play
on Instagram. Check out her book Rehumanize on Amazon, and she also has free stuff for you. There's a free Facebook group if you go to her website, and she also has a free webinar. It's called Claim Unstoppable Body Love with Marlee Liss. So go check it out. I will put all the links in the show notes, and you won't miss out on anything. There's so much amazing stuff for you to check out with Marlee on the internet world, which is how we all connect now. And I'm so grateful to have connected with you. We'll have to send Leah a little something.
I was just thinking that. Yeah. I'm like, thank you, Leah.
Thanks, Leah. We'll send this link to her. Okay. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.